बाकी you can be as raw as you want.
Let me tell you about rawness.
Focus on a second. एक दफा नीचे.
Okay.
Assalamu alaikum.
Wa assalam.
कैसा?
Alhamdulillah.
No, that's not how we start. But how many you did 100 episodes.
I did.
क्या कहेगा KAZI?
Yes.
KAZI AKBER.
Yes.
The reason why I really wanted you to come here, I've already told you this, but I'll put it on record, is because you heard everyone's stories. You heard everyone out. People came for 1 hour, pretty much, on average.
On average, but they were longer, yeah. Most of them are longer.
And you had conversations, and you heard them.
Yeah.
But I wanted to know your story. I wanted to hear you out.
Okay.
So that's why I was like, KAZI AKBER needs to come.
All right.
Yeah.
Well, I'm here. What about my story do you want to know?
We'll get started on that soon. But Assalamu alaikum again, KAZI AKBER.
Wa alaikum assalam, Mustafa Said. How you doing?
I'm doing good. But how are you?
Yeah, I'm all right. Alhamdulillah. I'm all right. This is now the third week into the break. I stopped podcasting, I think 3 weeks ago. Yeah, maybe 4. Mahina ho gaya shayad. I feel good. Alhamdulillah. Feel reinvigorated. I'm raring to go again now, inshallah. Trying to figure that out.
You said reinvigorated.
Yeah.
What do you mean by that?
Yeah, I was. So the last month of the podcast, I think I did 18 episodes in the month, and for me and my team, which is Wahab, one other person, that was a lot. Should is not a good word, but I don't think I should do that many in a month because they're long form and they're not really edited. Nothing's left out, and I also don't have any bars or any questions set to. It's just the breadth of these conversations. Sometimes it takes a lot out of me. So doing those many was not a good idea. But alhamdulillah, ho gaya. And the last few were a lot of fun. Irfan bhai wali, usse pehle Gul wali, usse pehle Fawzia wali, usse pehle ye aaye the Shehzad and Balaj and Mumna. All of these were fun, but usse pehle there were some heavy ones. Mohammad Muiz wali jo thi bahut heavy thi, right? So it's a beautiful thing, but just to do it all in such a short period of time, because your cognitive capital is a thing, right? And it's finite. So yeah. But now, alhamdulillah, I'm good. I'm settled.
So there's that of the digital media part.
Yeah.
What about you, like KAZI AKBER? Apart from digital media, how are you?
How am I? I'm alright, dude. I'm getting to a point where I would say I'm sorted, alhamdulillah. Because for the longest time, I've been unraveled because I've not had an anchor. So I was born in Hyderabad, right? And I moved to Karachi when I was 16, right? So this was fun, right? This is what's funny. I've had the good fortune, pleasure of calling at least 4 cities home. But I've always been dragged to those cities. I've never actually, kicking and screaming by the way, I've never gone to these cities off my own volition. So when I was in Hyderabad, the mere thought of living anywhere else frightened me. I was like, I want to live nowhere else. I want to be here in Hyderabad. I want to live here. I want to die here. That was dragged by my family. Nahi, Karachi chalta hai. I hated the idea. But then, as soon as I got to Karachi, I fell in love with Karachi. Now, I could not imagine myself living anywhere else. Karachi was it. Karachi was home. I wanted to live in Karachi. I wanted to die in Karachi. And then they were like, oh, cool story, but here you go. Now you're going to go to Kuala Lumpur, which is Malaysia. Kicking and screaming. I was like, I don't want to go to Kuala Lumpur. I want to live here. I want to die here. Then I went to Kuala Lumpur. Fell in love with that city. Beautiful city. Then I'm like, yeah, maybe I don't want to die here, but I definitely want to live here for the foreseeable future, right? They're like, oh, wonderful. And that's where so Karachi mein I did my A-levels from Nixer, got into literature, got into the spirit, the philanthropic spirit of Karachi, and that was always beautiful. That was very, very mysterious, but at the same time very powerful to me. that this is Karachi is the philanthropic capital of the world. Most people, nobody sleeps hungry here, and that's ridiculous because there's such dearth and there's such a disparity between the people that have and the people that don't have, right? And yet no one sleeps hungry. No, and everyone. What's beautiful is everyone. There's a beauty in how we take that for granted. That's a little paradoxical for me to say, but there's a beauty in how we take that for granted. कि भूखा किसी ने नहीं सोना यहाँ पे, right? But I digress from my digression. So I went to Kuala Lumpur, and I was like, yeah, बस मुझे यहीं रहना है. Cool story. You're going to leave your degree. So I was doing a degree in post-colonial and diasporic literature. You're going to leave your degree in half. You're going to go to Toronto. I was like, I don't want to go to Toronto, But then I went to Toronto, and then I fell in love with that city, a beautiful city that is. But yeah, and then I figured that I was going to live there and die there. They're like, oh, wonderful, you think that's going to happen? Then I went back. Then I was then I was called back. This time though, at the age of, I think must have been 26. I was like, okay, I'm going to make the decision to go back to Karachi, right? So I've been disheveled and unanchored for the most part. But now I feel like I'm at that point age-wise. Obviously, I'm not young anymore. But also mentally, I'm like, okay, maybe now's the time to get anchored. And I've said this to you before. There's people that get anchored quicker, and they have obviously a head start on people like me who just can't figure themselves out, right? But yeah, to answer your question and to make a long story even longer, I think I'm at that point where I'm getting sorted out now. अभी भी पता नहीं शायद 10 साल और लग जाए मुझे क्या पता लेकिन I think Alhamdulillah it's getting there.
It's getting there.
It's getting there.
Not bad.
Yeah.
In the story of yours, there's a lot of they, right?
Yeah.
They. Who's they? That's family. Yeah, that's your like you. Who's they?
So they is the people who've governed my life for most of it. They is obviously the elders.
Right.
Okay, so some of them were family and others weren't. क्या होता है? When you go through, so I've had a lot of abuse in my life, right? So when you go through this abuse, you develop this little voice in your head that tells you कि यार अगर ये आपके because your mind is a rational mechanism, right? Your mind wants to make sense of things. So your mind goes, अगर आपके साथ ये हुआ है, there must be a reason for it, right? And you must have been the reason for it, right? So for as long as I can remember, Alhamdulillah, I've had a good mind. It's good, it processes things, but for as long as I can remember, I've always suspended my critical faculty. I've always given it to other people, right? So they is the people who I gave control of my life to. They is the people I looked towards for validation. कि यार, whatever I was trying to be, am I a good student? Am I a good son? Am I a good podcaster? Anything really, right? Am I a good person? Am I a good Pakistani? Am I a good man? Am I a man at all? So they is an amalgamation. They को जितना abstract रखो उतना सही है. It will make more. My story will make more sense, I think. They is abstract.
I can relate to the fact that you feel anchored now. You haven't feel anchored because even for me, like I used to live in. So I moved. I go from area to area and then city to city. I moved from Azizabad federal area to Gulshan Iqbal.
Okay.
Right? And then from Gulshan Iqbal I moved to Simi Valley in LA.
Right. Alright, Allah Raham kare.
Right. So I moved countries. And then I came back to Karachi and then I was trying to settle here.
Okay.
And then I moved back.
How old are you when all this is happening?
This is me growing up with time. There is no place. Like the first time was 9, the second time was 12, the third time was 17, 17ish.
That's not a good age to move. And 17 is not a good age.
It's not, right? And then like I relate to that so much. Now you feel anchored. How does it feel to feel anchored? Like that's.
Yeah, it feels scary. It feels terrifying, I think, because क्या होता है एंकर्ड ब्लिस में एक सुकून होता है, right? And because my life's mostly been chaos, and now again the thing is there's only so much I can divulge as far as details are concerned, but most people will look at me and be like, oh, life of privilege, what does he even know about chaos, right? But there's been a lot of chaos in my life. तो क्या होता है कि when you kind of detach from that and become anchored, वो chaos, it's still there, the chaos is still always going to be there, but you start calming down, और फिर जो वो सुकून मिलता है ना, then you have something else that you could lose, because then it's perceivable कि वो सुकून ख़त्म हो जाए फिर से. So it's terrifying. क्या ये anchor अभी तो मैं हुआ हूँ, अभी फिर से शायद I might get uprooted again. तो while it's beautiful and there's absolute strength in being anchored, there's also this absolutely terrifying, it's just dread कि यार ये ख़त्म भी हो सकता है. But on the whole, just grateful. I'm just grateful कि ये हुआ.
Alhamdulillah.
Yeah.
It feels scary to feel anchored right now.
Yeah, it feels scary to feel like I have something to lose, because for the most part.
So you value it so much.
Because yeah, देखो, when I was 18, I had decided कि I will not live past 30. I'm 29 right now, right? And now I want to live. Now I do want to live past 30. Now I want to, I want to give, and I want to take, and I want to receive, and I want to send, and I want to do all these things, right? And send what, receive what? Well, just goodness. Any kind of goodness. Decency, a polite attitude, a courteous smile, whatever. Courteous smile, whatever, right? Whatever my content is. Anything, everything, right? Conversations, videos, whatever. Just do good things. And expect good things then, inshallah, right? So yeah, for the longest time I thought I had nothing to lose, but I have so much to lose because I have so much to give.
Yeah, I love that. You have so much to lose because you have so much.
Because this has been a story and a half, no? Like my journey. I've picked up because I've had one of my great blessings has been the fact that I have been in the tutelage of some truly amazing teachers. For as far back as I can remember, I've had amazing teachers, right? तो उन लोगों ने जो मुझे सिखाया है, I have to pass it on, because some of those people aren't around anymore, and they showed me immense kindness, and I'd be remiss if I didn't at least try to put it forward. कि मैं नाम लेना शुरू करूँगा, मैं ever since I was very very young, I've been in the tutelage of some truly brilliant people. ये अल्लाह का करम है मेरे ऊपर. तो if nothing else, then for just to be grateful and mindful of the fact that I've been given this gift, I have to put it forward, inshallah.
Inshallah. How was your childhood?
Yeah, my childhood was beautiful. Yeah, amazing, but also terrifying, obviously. Obvious ऐसे बोलूँ जिस सबका होता है. My childhood was, it was interesting. I have no regrets about my childhood, but there was unconditional and just breathtaking love. But then there was also absurd amounts of violence in my childhood. So if I don't want to use one word because that would be reductive, but for the most part, it was just confusing. Because if I am worth this, if I deserve this much violence, then how am I also worthy of this much love? Try explaining that to an 8-year-old or a 5-year-old or a 3-year-old. It makes no sense, right? I was named after my grandfather, KAZI Muhammad Akbar I. So there was also this sense of you're supposed to do great things.
Yeah.
No, dude, I'm just supposed to be me. Whatever that is, I'm just supposed to figure that out. I don't even know what that is. No, you're supposed to do great things. No, you're not. No, you're not. You're supposed to make sense of things and try and be kind, and that's it. You're not supposed to do anything else. But yeah, so for the most part, it was just confusing because ek taraf se there was just so much love. It's too much love, right? And abhi tak, to this day, sometimes I choke up when I think about it, because how can I justify this? You know what I mean? Like, most of us, we start thinking like, oh, I must have done something to deserve this. No, dude. Allah ka karam hota hai. Because everything that is good is from Allah Miyan, and everything that is bad is stuff that you send forward. It's not complicated. And मैं Allah Miyan बोल रहा हूँ, but you can say the universe or whatever makes you comfortable. But it's not you, dude. You just work hard, or do that, or whatever. You just work hard. You just try and put your best foot forward. But that's it. ये आप नहीं कभी भी सोच सकते कि मैं लायक था तभी मुझे मिला. मैं लायक था मतलब जो लोग जिनको नहीं मिलता वो ना लायक थे. तभी उनको नहीं मिला. How does that make sense? Yeah. So yeah, my childhood was fantastic, dude. It was beautiful, but it was also terrifying. So here's the thing. It was the most beautiful childhood I've ever experienced, but I would not wish it on anyone. Nobody. I would not wish it on anybody. Because it was also very difficult.
Our childhood molds us the way we are today.
Yeah.
Why wouldn't you wish your childhood to anyone?
Yeah, it was difficult. I wouldn't want people to go through that. I would hope that somehow they could learn whatever I've learned, because I've learned some things. No, I've not learned a lot, but I've learned some things. And I would hope that they could learn this without going through whatever I've had to go through. I don't regret going through it. Allah ka karam hai mere upar. But I know that there are people that मुश्किल होता उनके लिए. So I wouldn't wish it on people.
Makes sense.
Yeah, but Allah का करम है, बहुत करम है.
Alhamdulillah to that.
Oh, dude, alhamdulillah, absolutely.
How was your school life? So starting from young to growing old, how did that go?
Yeah, my school life was interesting. So I'm Sindhi, right? My school life was interesting because there was a lot of racism directed towards me because I was Sindhi. The first language I learned how to speak was Sindhi, and there was a kind of vitriol that was palpable, but at the same time you couldn't call them out. कि यार आप देखो बात सुनो ये आप किस बुनियाद पे? I was never a bad child. I was a scared child. I was a confused child. But I was never bad. I think I was a child of love. Me personally, I think generally, if you ask anyone as a child, I would look at the world in wonderment. I would wonder, and I would ponder, and I would always be excited at anything new that I encountered. Anything. A new culture, different cuisine, whatever. It would just always excite me. As a child, you know how my eyes are big? They were always this way. They were always just so, I would look at things and be like, yeah, this is so exciting that I don't know this. So, but anyways, early on, there was a lot of vitriol directed towards me because I could only speak Sindhi. But uske baad, so I picked up Urdu, I picked up English. Both my parents were, mashallah, very proficient. Very is not a good, redundant. They were proficient at English. And so they taught me and my siblings English to Angrezi and then even Urdu, and then Sindhi. Then we became, we were all right at all three. And then we started prioritizing English over Urdu and Sindhi because that's another currency in a post-colonial country. We know this, right? Where if you can speak English, all of a sudden you just have more weight to whatever you say. That's nonsense. What if I just keep cussing and cracking jokes? Better. So initially there was a lot of vitriol directed towards me because of that. And then also I was never boyish. I was quite scared, and I didn't gravitate towards the things that that a boy should gravitate towards, quote unquote, right? So there was a lot of bullying, and I'm talking to some heavy duty bullying, like being shoved into dustbins, being put into cupboards, locked there, and then beatings to hoti thi. So that was my schooling all the way up to O levels when I moved to Karachi. And I moved to Karachi again. There was a little bit of bullying initially. But then, I sort of grew into my masculinity, and then the bullying stopped. Because then because I started working out, started becoming, big, muscular and all those things. And then people were concerned about their safety when interacting with me. So pehle, I was always concerned about my safety, and they were concerned about their safety for the most part. So yeah, dude, my schooling more or less was just two things. Me growing into the fact that I am Sindhi, and there's nothing wrong with that, because bachpan mein, if you get bullied for being Sindhi, you start figuring that there's something wrong with being Sindhi. So just that, there's nothing wrong with being Sindhi. And me figuring out what kind of a man I wanted to be, or what kind of a man I was, and what it is to be a man. Primarily, those were the two things that governed my school life, other than obviously my great love for literature and stories and my teachers, because just brilliant people that taught me. But yeah, more or less that. And just, again, okay, also, so there's a tangent there. What I wanted to be as a man, right? Or what kind of a man I thought was a good man. But then also how I would interact with women. Because, and it pains me to say this, but for the longest time I've been quite a misogynist. And not consciously, I'm sure, or that's what I would like to say now, but I've not interacted with women properly for the longest time. And by, obviously, alhamdulillah, nothing of the sort where, no assault or khuda na khasa. I think I need to elucidate this, and that's what I'm saying. No, nothing of that sort, but when I was younger, there was a lot of objectification. Bachi check kar le, so on and so forth, right? And that's what you learn. And so my schooling was also me sorting out, okay, that is wrong. That's no way to behave with women. Because I'm a little older than you are, right? So when I was in A levels, must have been 2010. There was this. Abhi bhi hai mere khayal mein, but I think you guys and people younger than you even are picking it up quicker, and they're more educated when it comes to this stuff. When I was young, you just didn't. There was no example of how to interact with propriety. Between how to interact with people, and especially how to interact with women. There was just you were just never told, right? So I think my schooling has been governed by primarily those two things, but then this third thing, which is figuring out how to properly interact with women of any age. Because मेरी अपनी बहनें थी, and even towards them, I feel for the longest time, at least pre-22 years old, I'd been not good, dude. Not good.
But you learned along the way.
Of course, dude. I learned. They were patient with me. My mom, my sisters were very patient with me. Every other female who's been in my life was very patient with me. My teachers were very patient with me. My friends were very patient with me. They taught me. And they, yeah. It's their kindness, Again, it has nothing to do with me.
You talked a lot about your teachers. Can you remember that one teacher that made an impact in your life? Yeah, pehla koi aisa teacher that made an impact.
Sure.
And what was that impact?
Okay, so again, this is not taking away from any of the other teachers.
Yeah.
But I'm definitely going to miss one if I start naming all of them. So I'll just start with the first one. The first teacher that made an actual impact, or the one that I can remember most readily, there was this person. He passed away a little bit ago. कोई 8 साल हो गए थे उनको. हो गए उनको pass away किए हुए या ज़्यादा. अल्लाह मुझे नसीब करे. He was this Christian teacher called Sir Joseph Patrick Dean. So all of us used to call him Sir Dean. He had taught my father. जब मेरे बाबा को पढ़ा रहे थे, he was aged even then. So by the time I got to him, he must have been 85. Right? Must have been around that old. And I was horrible at math. And I would go to him for math. I must have been 11 years old, 12 years old. So I'd go to him. And my father would tell me stories about this robust, educated man who would, who would just not compromise on discipline at all, right? So he believed in lashings, beatings and stuff as punishment, all those things, right? But he was a great teacher, and then if you learn math from him, at least your foundations were solid. So I used to go to him, and the sardine that I found was so far removed from the sardine that my father described, because हमें अपने उस्ताद की इतनी कदर नहीं होती है, I suppose. And the teacher that I found, he wasn't well off, and he was kind of dejected from it, because he was a Christian, right? He was kind of dejected from this society in Hyderabad, and all of them were just working towards moving abroad. And he had this little desk that he would teach us at. And Sardine ne, I think, I also did not say goodbye to him properly. I left on a very sour note because वो मारते थे. तो Sardine जो है एक metal rule पता नहीं बाहर लड़ाई चल रही है क्या चल रहा है. He used to, it's okay, it's alright. Sardine used to, दो उनके favorite होते थे objects, एक metal ruler or एक screwdriver, right? And he used to hit me on my fingers with a screwdriver. और उस ज़माने में the indignation that I felt कि यार मुझे मार रहे हैं, कैसे मार सकते हैं, was potent. So potent, in fact, कि I maneuvered my home situation to get out of that tuition. I stopped going to that tuition. And I maneuvered it how? Because if I were to tell my mom was like, nahin beta, we struggle, but power through it, it's okay. And in hindsight, I think she was right. In hindsight, I should have powered through it. It's just a little bit of adversity. He wasn't going to actually hurt me. It's nothing, dude. I don't even remember how much it hurt, but I remember everything that he said to me, everything that he taught me, I remember. Everything about propriety and whatever else, and about how you should always, even in the most difficult circumstances, it is on you to protect and preserve your dignity. That was a beautiful lesson, and he taught it to me in the most simplest way, in a way that a child would understand, right? So मैं वहाँ पे disheveled पहुँचता था, shirts not tucked in, बाल, I was a kid, right? And he'd be like, look at the difference between you and me. And I was like, age, obviously, because I'm so young and you're not. I had long hair as a man. It's like, I have hair, you have hair. I'm like, yes. He's like, look at my hair. He was old, whatever little hair I have, it's combed back to the side. My shirt, whatever it is, it's ironed and clean. Put on some cologne. So it doesn't matter what my situation is. I take pride in the fact that I conduct myself with dignity. You should too. Very simple message, right? Versus the way we teach our children, dekh tu pagal hai, tu jahil lag raha hai, tu you're looking like a slouch. All these ad hominem attacks that we use. The way he taught, it sticks with me to this day. But बहरहाल उस वक्त मेरा goal ये था कि I didn't want those punishments. And so what I did was I told my grandmother, my dadi, it's like, get me out of here. And so she kind of then convinced my mom, and my mom to this day, it's something that she's like, maybe I should have insisted a little more. You stick with this. But yeah, so that's one. Sardine is my first teacher. He also represented, at least to me, he represented a Renaissance man in the true sense, right? Because he wasn't he's a teacher of math, so he should just speak numbers, right? But he was also very well versed in all this. Very well versed. It's redundant. He was well versed in all this literature. He was a very good writer. He was a captivating writer. He had this command over all the languages that he spoke, not just English, Urdu even, right? He didn't speak it, but when he did speak it, it was solid. It was always potent. So he represented to me at least a window into what an enlightened mind looks like, right? Sadin. Yeah, that's the first one that I remember. उससे पहले होंगे मैं याद नहीं, अल्लाह रहम करे.
Makes sense. How's your relationship with your parents?
Yeah.
Because I've met your mother and
Yeah.
she's a beautiful person.
Alhamdulillah. My dad is also brilliant, mashallah say. So I think without getting too emotional, I think what I would say here, क्योंकि मुझे नज़र का भी बड़ा खौफ होता है कि मैं ज़्यादा तारीफ कर दूँगा नज़र ही लग जाए, अल्लाह माफ़ करे. तो but I wrote a book. उस किताब के पहले पेज पे लिखा हुआ है to Amma, the fire in my heart, and to Baba, the wind in my sails. That's more or less what I'd say about the two of them, right? Where my mom is always powered whatever is inside me. If there's any decency, it's from her. But then also propelling me forward physically, coming to terms with my fear, coming to terms with my hatred, my anger. My father's been instrumental in that. And also, obviously, all the material help, growth, nurturing that he's provided, mashallah. Allah ka karam hai, but he's done it. He's worked super hard, because when I was born, we actually didn't have that much. So my life has seen him grow in stature and wealth and all those things, alhamdulillah. Yeah. So yeah, just that.
How's your relationship with yourself?
Yeah, Mustafa, I've hated myself for about as long as I can remember. What's funny, or funny is not a good word, what's interesting is that when I started these self-hate blogs that I do on Instagram, or these self-hate sessions, is actually when I stopped hating myself. Right? So before, I've hated myself for about as long as till 26. When I came back, I hated myself. It had nothing to do with how I looked. I could look like whatever, and I hated myself. Whether I was fat, I have been really fat. Whether I was skinny or I was muscular or not. If I was doing good things or bad things, I just couldn't bring myself to, give myself positive regard. And I suppose that also comes from trauma, because again, if you're responsible for the trauma that's been done to you, then you are worthy of hate. It just makes sense, right? So I have not liked myself as a person. In fact, for most of it, people, and here's a pet peeve of mine. People start, they start trying to teach you what words mean. I know what the word means, and I'm using it for a reason. You think I don't know what hate means? People are like, oh, you dislike parts of your, no, dude, I hated myself. You need to understand what I'm saying. You need to listen. Don't talk, listen, right? I hated myself for most of it. Everything about me, everything. I think I've shaved my head a total of 6 times, and every time it was because it was definitely some kind of self-harm, right? Because I just didn't like what I saw in the mirror. And ab baal aise ho gaya, main budha ho gaya, say na. But I had thick, straight hair, and I just never could bring myself to style them in any which way, because I was like, fuck it, dude, I just couldn't stand myself. But yeah, now I've started easing up on that as well. So I've made a lot of mistakes, but I've come to terms with the fact that so you've made a lot of mistakes, and I've hurt a lot of people, and if I could, I would go and ask them for forgiveness. But वो भी अल्लाह रहम करेगा. मिलती है नहीं मिलती है, मुझे वो मौका मिलता है नहीं मिलता है, but I don't think I hate myself that much anymore, right? So it's interesting because it's paradoxical, because when I hated myself, उस वक्त my workouts and all those things were not self-hate hours. Now they are, because now I remember all the things that I hated myself for, and I try to make peace with them, with all of them, with any of them, with the inadequacy I felt as a teenager, or the rejection and indignation I felt as someone growing up in diaspora, which is just growing up abroad in Malaysia and Canada, where you were never completely anchored in any facet of your personality. Yeah. So now I talk with myself, and now I think it's become healthier, my relationship with myself, with my masculinity, with my femininity, with my inadequacy, with all of it. Alhamdulillah, it's gone a lot better. But yeah, for most of my life, I hated myself.
You said it got better after you started doing self-hate hours.
Yeah.
Why do you think that is?
Okay, so it was better when I started doing the self-hate hours, but it became better when I started the podcast, the relationship. It became better when I started the podcast, because before the podcast, I was like a ship in the ocean. I was being, I would go wherever the wind would push me, and that's an apt metaphor for a lot of people's lives, but that was mine. And so it didn't make sense to me what I was doing, right? And you need to have meaning. Whatever your meaning is, you need to have meaning. You need to have a meaning governing principle to kind of make sense of why whatever is the way it is, right? So I was doing this job that I hated, and so I'd come back from Canada, but every night I put my head on the pillow. I'd question why I was back, why I was in Karachi, and this went on for a year and change, right? Until finally I decided I couldn't do this anymore, and I just couldn't live like this. And then I said goodbye to that job, and whatever little savings I had, I invested in a little studio that, and then I started the podcast. And then once I started the podcast, I was like, whether this is a good decision or not, that's debatable. I will say it was, and other people will say, well, it wasn't financially sensible for you to do that. And, everyone to each their own. But my mental health, and mental health is a broad term, but my relationship with myself became a lot better, because this was the first time, in a sense, I had stood up for myself, right? And so if I stood up for myself, then I must be worth standing up for. At the tender age of 27, I stood up for myself for the first time. And uske baad se it got better. And then the self-hate hours just, along the way I picked up, because so I worked out for the better part of 11 years, and I was telling you the story, most of it was to just combat my own stifling sense of inadequacy. And I felt weak my whole life. I still feel weak, and so I work out and I got big, I got strong, but still felt weak, right? So, but now recently I've started working out because it feels good. And so self-hate is more or less, but again, people can interact with it however they choose. It's just content, right? Self-hate is just an homage to times in my life where I actually did hate myself a lot, to a very, very dangerous level. I hated myself. That's all. When I make these videos about with the workouts, that's all it is, because nowhere am I saying that I work out more than anyone else, less than anyone else. Nowhere am I saying I'm stronger or weaker than anyone else. It's not about that. It's just about, this is what I'm doing in the day, and if you can resonate, if you can interact, or if you can consume this content positively, I'm beyond happy, alhamdulillah. But if you can't, it's not my fucking problem, dude. It's just, I'm sorry, it's just not. But that's what it's called. It's not gonna change to self-love hour. It's not gonna change to I appreciate myself hour. It's not. This is what it is. And this is my life. It's my story. It's not. You write yours. Stop being governed by the need to tell my story. Tell me yours. Yeah.
And then you also mentioned self-hate की जो ideology got better after you started the podcast?
Yeah.
Is it better, like, and then you quit something?
Yeah, quit my job.
You quit your job. Is it because, like, did it get better because you did what you wanted to do? Like, how is that correlated?
Yeah, so I said, देखो, Viktor Frankl he was a Jew he was a Jewish doctor, I think. He's a Jewish doctor in Nazi Germany, or in around that time, right? And he survived 2 death camps, right? And when he came out of it, that's what he said. He said, when he met human beings, but colloquial discourse of that time, when man is faced with these terrible, absurd atrocities, what is important is not to count how many people perished. What is important is to understand why even one survived. Why even one person survived. And his argument was that he quoted Friedrich Nietzsche and Dostoevsky. These are the philosophers, right? He quoted them as well. He quoted Nietzsche as saying, "For he who has a why will get through any how." Right? I think I just didn't have my why, or at least not a why that was acceptable to me. Like, why are you going to university? Because it's the thing to do. Is that enough? Is that adequate? For a time it was, and when it was, I was solid. I went to NIXR instead of the other schools that I got into for my A-levels. Why did you go to NIXR? Because NIXR gave me the chance to interact with and be taught by people that the other schools did not give me. Is that an adequate why? It seemed like an adequate why back then, so then I was solid, right? But if my why had been because all my friends are going, maybe that's adequate for me, but I have to decide, right? What's adequate for me? This job that I quit, what was my reason? What was my why? Because it pays a lot of money. Was that adequate? Shuru mein maybe it was. But after a while, it wasn't. So you need to find an adequate why. The podcast, I think, for me, became an adequate why. Like, this is what I want to do. And because I had that why, all of a sudden, my relationship with myself just got better. Alhamdulillah.
What's your adequate why?
My adequate why is to better myself and to make myself, and Jordan Peterson says this, I think, to turn myself into someone that I would want to take responsibility for. This is a person, introduce this person to the world. But I need to conduct myself accordingly. For the longest time, I've been embarrassed of myself. I hated myself because I was embarrassed of myself. And abuse and stuff does that to you. When physical, verbal, mental abuse does that to you, right? You're taught to be someone who's ashamed of themselves, right? And yeah, my adequate why is now to build someone who is not ashamed. Because here's the thing, guys. All of us look for acceptance from everyone. From everyone. मुआशरा हो गया, वालिदैन हो गए, आपके दोस्त हो गए, आपके juniors हो गए, seniors हो गए, colleagues, all those things. The thing is, no, none of them have that validation or that acknowledgement to give you. You need to acknowledge yourself first, right? So you need to figure out, I needed to figure out, about general baat kar raha hu, I needed to figure out, my why, and my why is just conducting myself like the sort of person who I would take responsibility for. And also to send some good out. That for me has always been a good why, is to send some good out into the world. And I mean good in the most frustratingly abstract way you could take it. Any good. But just send some good out into the world. Whatever it is, dude. Like, you make your posts. Like, even if you're influencing one person, to me that's an adequate why. To me that's alright. Right? It doesn't matter if you don't have 100,000 followers or what have you. It doesn't matter. Maybe that will come, but maybe that doesn't matter. Maybe it's alright if it never happens. Maybe the why is just creating goodness. And yes, that's content. Good content, but it could also just be a good t-shirt. It could also just be a good journal or a good pair of jeans or a good artwork, you know. Maybe that's your why, and that is adequate as well. But really, just turning yourself into someone that you could take responsibility for, I think that is an adequate why. That, and also obviously being a good Muslim, which encompasses all of these things. Yeah, it goes without saying.
Right.
Yeah.
That makes sense.
Alhamdulillah.
Is vulnerability, is vulnerability a good thing or a bad thing?
Dude, I think it's a beautiful thing, vulnerability. But to this day, I don't understand. I've not been able to reconcile my relationship with it, because it's just never been something that's been acceptable to me, for me. I'm a man, right? And not only am I a man, I'm also the eldest son, right? So all of these things just don't let, all these things and vulnerability just don't go, right? So being scared, there's no room for that. There's no room for crying. There's no room, for me at least, for myself, there was just never any room for that. I think vulnerability is a beautiful thing. I think obviously it needs to be ascertained what vulnerability is. You need to, you need to kind of distinguish between vulnerability and other kinds of toxic behavior, where maybe you're playing to some brand of identity politics to blackmail someone. That's not vulnerability. That's not vulnerability either. But true vulnerability, I think, is essential for you to do anything worthwhile. Is for you to at least acknowledge how broken you are. Where are all the cracks, right? But it's just been something that that's been impossible for me to engage with, abhi tak. And that also, ties into my relationship with my problematic masculinity. But yeah, just cannot, for whatever reason, right? Even when I go to, so I'm doing a diploma in therapy. Even when I go there, I just always have this scowl, and this scowl keeps the tears away, right? And it's just always like that. But yeah, I think vulnerability it's essential for you to do anything worthwhile. Is for you to first be cognizant of the fact that आप भी इंसान हो, और आप भी टूटे हुए हो, तो अगला बंदा भी शायद टूटा हुआ है. I think vulnerability is where empathy comes from, and if you're not vulnerable, or at least at home with vulnerability, I don't think you're going to have empathy. You could have sympathy, hi bechara, right? But you can't have empathy. Yaar, ye main bhi ho sakta tha. And I think as a society, we reject so completely our great proclivity for evil that it is astounding. Everyone wants to acknowledge what a demon Zahir Jafar is, right? No one wants to consider that could have been any of us. They don't make that connection. He's not an actual monster, dude. We're all monsters. And that understanding will only come after you're at home with vulnerability. Later you have this facade, this you have this gold armor or whatever you want to call it. Bhai, I would never do anything bad, wouldn't you? You're one bad day, dude. You're one bad day away from being him or worse. That's all it is. But yeah, vulnerability, it's beyond essential. I think it's required for anything.
Do you think you're vulnerable?
Yeah, I think I've tried to be vulnerable. I think I've definitely become more vulnerable as I've gotten older. I joke about this often. When I was younger, I was a man. किसी चीज़ पे नहीं रोता था. Now you show me something sensitive in terms of content, and you could get me to cry pretty easily. But again, what's interesting there is I could cry for other people, but I will not acknowledge my own pain sometimes. There's still that problem कि नहीं तुम तो strong हो ना, तुम तो बर्दाश्त कर लोगे. लाज़मी है तुम्हारे लिए बर्दाश्त करना, तुम मर दो. But दूसरों की तकलीफ, that becomes that becomes kind of difficult for me. So yeah, I think I'm more vulnerable now than I was before, but it's an ongoing process. It's अभी है काम हो रहा है उसमें. Inshallah.
Do you like it?
Yet I think it's very uncomfortable. I think it's extremely uncomfortable because the thing is, this is abstract, no? There's no progress bar. अच्छा 50% काम हो गया. It's never going to be any progress bar. It's always just going to be progress as an abstract concept. So I think it's extremely uncomfortable because you're constantly reworking, you're constantly unpacking yourself and then repacking yourself. अच्छा अब ये ठीक है नहीं, फिर unpack करो पूरी चीज़ को. So I think it's uncomfortable. But alhamdulillah, I am. The more you accept your vulnerability, the more you become at home with yourself as a human being. Like मैं इंसान हूँ और मैंने सारा काला मुँह किया है, पर कोई बात नहीं है. अल्लाह ताला माफ़ करेंगे और अल्लाह ताला रहम करेंगे, क्योंकि रहम तो उन्हें नहीं करना है, माफ़ भी उन्हें नहीं करना है, तो फिर आप क्या कर रहे हो? इस काम करो, अपना सुकून करो. Don't try and carry the world on your shoulders. It's just not big enough. Your shoulders.
Did you feel like you were carrying the world on your shoulders?
Yeah, dude, for the longest time. I thought, because again, back to that trauma thinking now, I thought everything was my responsibility.
Being the eldest kid?
Being a man, being the eldest kid, and just being someone who thought that they had caused something. Trauma just, or violence or abuse just happens, dude. It's no one's fault. It's the abuser's fault. It's not your fault. You know what I mean? It's that same victim blaming can be understood in multiple paradigms, right? I blame the victim. I blame myself. So I took that and applied it writ large to everything. फिर अगर ये मेरी गलती है, तो फिर बाकी चीज़ें मेरी गलती है. फिर हर चीज़ ही मेरी गलती होगी शायद. And yeah. So yeah, I blame myself too. I blame myself for a lot of things.
Do you still blame yourself for a lot?
No. I'm not stupid. No, I don't. Because it's the silliest thing in the world. You're going to, and the thing is, there's a hint of narcissism, by the way, in that. Like, you're arrogant enough to think that you are responsible for all of this. Dude, you're one person. You're completely insignificant. These things just they happen, and they happen because they happen, dude. Whatever metaphysical model you ascribe to, we ascribe to Islam and our religion. But it really doesn't matter. Whatever metaphysical model you ascribe to, whether it's what Leibniz said about monadology or Descartes or whatever, it doesn't matter, right? It's definitely not your responsibility to take all of that on your shoulders. They're just not big enough. You just don't have the cognitive capital. You're just going to burn yourself out. There's just no other way. So I think now I am at home with not taking responsibility for everyone's actions. If someone acts in bad faith, it's a problem for me if it's a problem for me. And if it's not a problem for me, then it's not my problem. Simple. You live life like that. It's more comfortable. Food tastes better, colors are more vivid. You're more comfortable.
You like it better?
I think so. Alhamdulillah.
Who is KAZI AKBER?
I don't know, man. I have no idea. And maybe at 18 years old, I had an answer. I don't have an answer anymore.
That's interesting.
Yeah. Oh, dude. At 18, I had all the answers. I knew what was right and what was wrong. The older I got, the more confused I got. Now I don't know which way is up.
Does it need to go up?
No. Again, yeah, no. I just don't know, right? Which way it needs to go. I think. But if I were to venture a guess, I could say I have a few hopes for who KAZI AKBER is. I would hope KAZI AKBER is someone who listens. I hope KAZI AKBER is someone who is at least trying to be kind and trying to act in good faith. And just trying to be proper and decent. In the most colloquial ways those words are understood. Right? Proper and decent. Decency, what's decency is subjective. Nahi, yaar. Don't go into an infinite regress. Just try and understand what I'm saying. I just hope KAZI AKBER is at least those things. But I have no idea who that guy is. No clue. I don't know who shows up.
Do you think you'll figure it out?
No. I don't think I'll figure it out, and I don't think I have a problem with not figuring it out. I think as long as, because again, my understanding of all of this is very functional. It's very utilitarian. So as long as I can do some good work, and as long as in relation to other people I am a certain way, kind, decent, proper, helpful if I can be, and all those things, inshallah, Allah ke hukum se, I'm alright with that. I suppose I'll understand more and more about who the guy is as I go on living. Allah mujhe hayati de, inshallah. But yeah, I don't think I'll ever completely figure it out, and I think I'm at home with that. I think recently I've started reading Carl Jung, who was a student of Freud, but then they kind of diverged on certain topics about psychology. And Carl Jung has this concept of the shadow and the persona, the ego. And I think it's very interesting, and I think that has all, a bit more, like with most of the philosophers and theories, it's helped me try and understand what I am more, or why I work the way I do. But again, it's just there's no progress bar per se. There's progress always, but there's no progress bar, and I don't know if I'll ever completely understand it. That's okay. That's cool. I know I at least know that I am a body and a soul. That's fine. That's a good place to be. But I understand myself in the context of other people, and if I'm doing these things, I don't, again, never say never, but I don't think I would make a video titled "Who is KAZI AKBER?" Or if I made a video, it'd probably be like 1,000 videos, because every day I'm a different thing. It's the context, right? It's again, situational determinism. It's like it depends on what context you put me in. If you put me in front of a pizza, I am
3,000 calories.
I am a destroyer of pizzas, right? But I don't know. Put me in front of a Persian text, and I am illiterate. Who the hell knows? I don't know. And I'm okay with that. Alhamdulillah.
One last word for KAZI AKBER.
Hope. Always hope. Hope is good. And not having hope is haram. Never despair the mercy of your Lord. That's from the Quran. Not having hope is haram. So hope.
I think that was beautiful.
Yeah, man. Alhamdulillah.
That was fist bumps are okay. We got confused. But how did you like it?
Yeah, I think whatever you're doing is wonderful. I think जब आपने पहली बार मुझसे concept share किया था, it was fantastic. तब भी मैंने आपको बोला था कि it's not going to be easy and it's not going to be comfortable going places with people, but I think it's good what you're doing, and I hope that you can somehow make this sustainable for yourself.
Hopefully, inshallah.
Yeah, inshallah. But it's not like this isn't like you could have picked something easier.
Oh, wow.
You could have picked quite a few things that were easier. But I think, yeah, fantastic. Alhamdulillah.
Have you ever opened up to anyone like this?
No, dude.
In the public space?
Public space, chodo. My therapist, my therapist literally wants to tear her hair out because, again, इतना ही मैं उनसे भी बात करता हूँ शायद about vulnerability and all those things, and she's constantly like, what's the problem? I'm like, I don't know what the problem is, dude. I don't know. मुझे क्या पता? But like, I'll incite every philosopher under the sun if I can avoid talking about my feelings. I'll be like, yeah, देखो, मैं आपको बताता हूँ actually मसला क्या है. Dostoevsky ये बोलता है, like, what are you doing, dude? Let's talk about, no, can't. So it's not easy, Mustafa. It's not easy, but alhamdulillah, I think this was progress for sure.
Did you think you talked about your feelings?
I think I spoke about at least some of my feelings. I think you'll find कि जहाँ मैं feelings की नहीं बात कर रहा हूँ, वहाँ पे आप मेरी feelings वाज़े तौर पे देख सकते हैं. I think more than anything else, I'm governed by fear, right? And I think where I start talking about other things is where you see my fear most vividly. I also think that one of the things that has characterized my life is having no space. Because again, when people commit violence against you, what they're doing essentially, and that's why Mera Jism Meri Marzi makes so much sense to me, is that people take away your space. right? And that's why you'll notice things like someone shutting the door too loudly bothers me more than it'll bother other people, right? Because it's space.
It's
right?
invading your space.
And because I've already just reneged so much space, giving any more to me, unacceptable.
Yeah.
Right? So
that's how important it is to you.
Yeah, exactly.
One last handshake. Thank you for coming. It was good to have you.
Dude, it was a beautiful thing to come, man. Alhamdulillah.
I appreciate you coming.
I appreciate you calling me, man.